The Fire was actually the last episode that was written by Larry Charles, the guy who I've learned throughout these inside looks and doing this review series was definitely like the one behind a lot of the episodes that had like very dark humor. As he described in this inside look, and I'm sure probably other ones in the past, Seinfeld had its moments like an episode like The Fire, where you take something and you turn it 10 degrees one way, it's sad and tragic. But if you turn it 10 degrees the other way, it's funny and hysterical. It's just like a interesting like artistic concept when it comes to storytelling in any sort of like type of like television like piece like sitcoms or drama or whatnot. It's a very interesting concept to do so. So really, the only idea that Larry Charles really had going into this episode was the story with George and the fire and his reactions to that. That's what he started with and basically worked around that. And the second big story, of course, episode actually had happened to someone who worked in like the building next to them. But of course, it was not a funny tragedy, but just the idea of of like the jealousy that came from the other employees about the attention. Charles thought that was a good, story to explore in the Seinfeld, and a very good story, of course, for Elaine. Which that story actually tied in the other three characters in some ways. Like George's was kind of on his own, even though he kind of got involved with Jerry's storyline at the end. But it was just an interesting way to tie it in. But anyways, let's talk about the episode. So the fire starts off. Jerry, I think, is just doing some improv work, and he was talking with this one guy whose name is Ronnie K, who does a bunch of like prop comedy and such. He kind of like lingers in here and out in the episode. Kramer is still working on getting his coffee table book about coffee tables being worked on with Pendant Publishing. Now, I thought back in the Cigar Store Indian, well, I think Lippman got on Elaine because she didn't pitch the idea before Kramer did. But there's a co-worker of Elaine's named Toby. She was the one working on Kramer's coffee table, and the two of them seem to be really getting along good. Now, I'm not sure if they were trying to imply that she was Kramer's girlfriend, even though, of course, Kramer did bring her along to the club to watch Jerry the one night, or if they were just friends, just hanging out because they're bonding over Kramer's coffee table book about coffee tables. And it's also shared towards the beginning that there is a senior editor position that opened up, and I know Elaine was saying how, especially Toby was saying how, Lippman was very high on Elaine, and Elaine thought she had a good shot at getting the promotion. Toby, though, is a very obnoxious woman. I mean, she's very obnoxious. She's enthusiastic, she's energetic, she's loud. Someone who would easily get on Elaine's nerves. Which is why I still thought this was also a very good Elaine story. So anyways, in the meanwhile, though, George is dating a woman who I think was like a server or something at the improv bar where Jerry does a lot of his improv at, who has a son named Ben. I think that might be the only time that one of the cast members dates someone who has a kid, I think. But apparently, George was, up to, being involved with planning the kid's birthday party. And of course, when entertainment comes up, he's talking about Bozo the Clown, which nobody he talks to knows who the heck Bozo the Clown is. And he was obsessing over that, how, Bozo was the thing when he was his age. And everybody was like, George, move on, Bozo's gone. It's not going to happen, no Bozo. So instead, they got Eric the Clown, which George was trying to talk to, and at the party, and him and George just weren't getting along, and And again, he's saying, forget about Bozo. And then also, nobody was saying they knew who Bozo was. So whoever this guy is, forget it and move on from Bozo. But then I think Robin's mother and her grandmother were both there, and they saw George. And they were praising how great of a young man George was, this, and that, and all these good things about George. And it's one of those moments where it's like, yeah, that's not going to last too long. Because it sure does happen. Because George walks into the kitchen saying he smells some smoke. And there was a fire in the oven. But George freaks out, screaming out, "Fire!" And he just, storms through the crowd. He knocks over Eric the Clown. He knocks over the mother, the grandmother. He knocks over a bunch of kids just for him to get to the door. And now everybody hates him. Eric the Clown came after him with his shoe. And then George tries to cover it up, saying that he was just trying to be a leader and make sure that doorway was cleared out of the way for people to get out. Everybody kept saying it was George only caring about himself and not getting everyone else out, and having their lives be on the line just so George can have his saved, basically. Which obviously has Robin completely call off the whole thing, and basically end the relationship with George. Of course, George tries to get back together with her. We'll talk about that when we get to the end of the episode. So as far as, Elaine, Toby, Kramer, and Jerry go, the reason why this all ties in, was first off, again, Elaine was just so annoyed with Toby and can't stand her, how annoying she is. Kramer, though, brings her down to the improv club, to watch Jerry's act. And of course, Jerry meets Toby for the first time, and he even sees how obnoxious she can be. And Jerry says this is a big show for him because there's a guy from Entertainment Weekly, I think it was, who's going to be there doing an article on Jerry. And Jerry does his act. He was distracted the whole time because Toby was just reacting so loud to every single thing he said. And then Jerry was obviously getting very distracted, and he was getting upset about it. He tells another joke that Toby didn't like, and she starts booing him obnoxiously. She was literally heckling him like crazy. And then Jerry even confronted her, saying, "What was up with that?" And she basically said, "Hey, if you can't take it, you can't handle it in this business or whatnot." And Jerry was very upset because they ended up writing a really horrible review about him in that Entertainment Weekly article. So I think it was George who talked him into going to Toby's office and heckling her. He does that and basically does the same thing and upsets Toby. She runs out of the office. And this is where I get my inner Kramer. So Kramer obviously knows what happens. So Kramer follows Toby. And Toby has a street sweeper run over her foot and cuts off her pinky toe. And then, of course, Toby's taken to the hospital, and this leads to the monologue I kind of hyped up about originally back in the previous review. So, originally, this whole monologue, this was actually going to be done, this whole scene was supposed to actually be shot for real. We were supposed to see all this happening. Instead, they had Michael Richards just cut a monologue to tell the whole story. And trust me, it's a good story to hear. Again, we've already seen, Jerry telling his story about the his analogy of the second Spitter story. That was the JFK, parody or whatnot from the Boyfriend episode. We had George telling his story about saving the whale and the marine biologist. Now we got Michael Richards having his moment, just telling this big monologue. So he found the toe. He put it in a Cracker Jack box, and he jumped off on a bus to take off for the hospital. Well, as they're on there, there's a mugger who pulls a gun, and then everybody's freaking out or whatnot. And then Kramer gets up and gets in his face, and the guy says, "Where do you think you're going, Cracker Jack?" And then Kramer claims he just did some kung fu and just knocked him out cold. And everybody's just freaking out, and then the bus driver apparently passed out from all the commotion. The bus, as Kramer said, is out of control. So he grabbed him by the collar, he threw him off to the side, he gets behind the wheel, now Kramer's driving the bus. And then that's where George tells him, you're Batman. He's like, "Yeah, I am Batman." So then the mugger, he gets conscious and he gets back up and he reaches over and starts choking Kramer while he's driving. So he's like fighting him off with one hand and he's driving the bus with the other hand. And then they get to the next stop. He opens up the door and he kicks him out. And of course, Jerry said, "You kept making all the stops?" And then Kramer goes, "Well, people kept ringing the bell." So of course, Elaine finds out. But then here's where, of course, Larry Charles got the idea of the story. So the idea of this story actually came because there was a woman who working in the building next to where they worked at, putting the show together, who had a horrible tragedy and lost a baby, which of course was not funny. But what was odd though, they kept it as a minor somewhat tragedy with Toby losing her pinky toe, which the pinky toe apparently was able to get put back in place storyline wise, of course. When it happened. But what Larry Charles thought was, odd and and what thought this would be a good idea for Elaine is that when Toby came back to work after getting the pinky toe put back in place, everybody was feeling sorry for her and getting all this attention. And it leads to Toby getting the promotion to senior editor that Elaine thought she was going to get. And of course, there's a scene where Toby comes back, everybody's in the hallway, and they start back into Elaine's office, and Elaine's being pushed back further and further in line, and she's trying to get their attention, hey, hello, and she gets knocked over, all her papers are falling over the place. It was just a perfect illusion of showing everything falling apart for Elaine, of course, as of course she doesn't get the promotion because of the pinky toe and how Lipman felt sorry for her. Of course, Kramer raves about it. Afterwards, and Elaine's yeah. I think she's happy for her when she really isn't. But yeah, the idea of it's I guess this whole episode started with the idea that Larry Charles had of George just knocking over women and children to escape from a fire. And then, of course, the second story was again this with Toby and the attention she got from her scary incident, but it drove Elaine completely nuts because of how much attention that she was getting over a pinky toe. But the episode though ends with Jerry. He got the Entertainment Weekly guy to give him another shot and do another article to show that, hey, I just had this an obnoxious heckler in the crowd that was just driving me nuts. So in this time, and this is how the episode ends, George is at the club that night trying to smooth things over with Robin, his girlfriend, who again obviously was the daughter of the mother of the kid that she was. Well, basically he's trying to smooth over the relationship he ruined because of how he reacted running out from the fire. So he obviously promises not to cause another commotion again, but he's asking for another chance. And Robin says, "I don't know, I'll think about it." While Jerry though is doing his thing, that Ronnie K, who I mentioned earlier, it was at the beginning of the episode, he was he is a more of a prop comic, and he was going to be he was just rehearsing some stuff with props. The thing he was rehearsing involved him using a gun, and George, not knowing who he was, overreacted and started yelling that he's got a gun, and of course it caused a lot of commotion in the club, and people ran out on Jerry in the middle of his act until Robin had to correct George, saying, "George, this is Ronnie K. He's a prop comic or whatnot. He was just rehearsing one of his bids he does." And then Jerry comes out and he's always angry. He goes, "George, can I have a word?" And obviously that does not that makes the decision easy for Robin. That's how the episode airs. So yeah, George obviously shown, and it was a good George thing because it shows that George cares about nobody but himself really. Especially whenever his life was on the line, he basically threw everyone else into the fires of hell, and he basically just tried to escape for his own good. And then, of course, I'm pretty sure that didn't help Jerry with his review. And then, Kramer, again, I said in the last episode so that like everybody but George came out the victor in that episode. This episode, it felt like Kramer was the one who technically still came out the victor because he was a hero for, saving Toby's pinky toe. And then, of course, he still is getting his coffee table book about coffee tables being written as well. And again, Toby gets promoted to senior editor. So that's the Fire episode, guys. That was a good episode. I feel like, because there's some trivia pieces on like IMDb who says, oh, this episode is going to be called this or being called that. Although the Fire was a pivotal point episode, they should consider calling this episode the Pinky Toe. I think that would have been a good. I think that's what this episode is more known for, is the Pinky Toe. Like I said, though, this was the last episode written by Larry Charles. Let me see here. Anything else really says so in here? Now there is, of course, it wasn't on this disc, on any of these discs. I'll double check again, but there is some like hand-drawn, like signed imitation, like comics that they have done a couple times on some of the discs, and this Pinky Toe story is one of them. And again, it was literally supposed to have it was really supposed to originally have the actual scene done, but again, it ended up not being the case. Let me see here, and that's pretty much it. That's the episode called The Fire. Next two episode reviews are parts 1 and 2 of the next episode, which is a 2-part episode, and it's called The Raincoats. Another good episode. Following that, though, we got one of my favorites that I can't wait to talk about, because it's more so I'm just a fan of the backstory of that episode, but we'll get to that in 3 videos. So the next 2 are going to be The Raincoats, part 1 and 2. So guys, what were your thoughts on the Fire episode? Please leave your thoughts down in the comment section below, and be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content to my channel. Follow me on Twitter at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night, and peace out, everybody.